Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. This is a Practical Training Podcast. I am Mike Bell, and the show is brought to you by Practical Training Professionals right here in beautiful Southern Maryland. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a very special episode. This is a first for the podcast. We have on our first husband and wife training duo. All right. They're coming on tonight from the West Coast, from Oregon, Bushido Defense. We're joined today by Jose and his wife, Koddie. Now, what's special about Jose and Koddie? First of all, they both have a background in law enforcement, so they've got that going for them. Jose has an extensive background in military and extensive background in martial arts, so he's got that going for him. But what I really like about the pair is that they both train together and they both train their students. What I mean by that is they both train martial arts together. They both train in the gym together. They live together. They breathe together. They train their students together. They are together. As opposed to sometimes what you see in this industry is the husband and wife duos. Oftentimes it's the husband that's out there teaching the classes and it's the wife that's at home, printing out their certificates or selling the classes or booking the venues or doing this or doing that. But there's not a lot of women trainers in this industry. And that's what intrigued me so much about Bushido Defense. I had to get them on. And without wasting time getting into their background and figuring out this or that, let's just get right into it. So let me start first by just asking this question, and then we'll bring him right in here to the studio. What is it about firearms that makes you think that you need to train somebody how to use them?
So, do you mind if I start out on this one? So, I think the two things that come to my mind first off when you ask that is one thing is that I think that a lot of people think that training or self-defense is intuitive, and in a lot of ways it is. But in order to improve and really hone those skills, I think it requires some actual understanding and knowledge. It's not just intuitive, and I know that because I've trained with people who don't have any formal training or education or experience when it comes to that, and there's so many misconceptions about so many different ideas, or just even a complete lack of knowledge of things like the things that come to mind are things like utilization of cover when we're talking about firearms in a self-defense situation, or how to manipulate your firearm, or how you should carry it, how you should store it. There's so many things that aren't intuitive that you really do have to learn. And I know that there's a lot of people training that, or not necessarily training in a formal capacity, but just people who are out telling other people how they should handle their firearms and what they should do with them, that are giving bad information.
Mm-hmm.
And people who don't know any better, they hear that and they think, okay, this is what I'll do. And so then that cycle kind of repeats itself, and it sort of spreads. It's sort of just like bad media, bad news.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for people who have put in the time and the training, and to try to correct some of those misconceptions, because they can be deadly, if they're used in the wrong situation when it really matters. And then I think the other thing that comes to my mind is just sort of the evolution of, I guess, bad guys over time, throughout history. Like we were saying before, we started out throwing rocks at each other, and then that evolved to throwing sharp items and throwing spears, and then projecting bows from arrows from bows. And so as people who wish to do harm to other people progress in their tactics and their methods, I think it's very important for people who wish to protect themselves or others to also progress and make sure that they're staying one step ahead, or at least on a level playing field. So
Okay.
Right. And I think of it like you're absolutely right. Anybody can pick up a gun and squeeze the trigger and shoot it, right? And that's not what we're teaching. What we're teaching is an efficient way and a safe way to use that firearm, right? And that's based off of practices and things like that. It's kind of like the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, to take a sculpture and to take away what you don't need until you have something a little bit more refined, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of piggybacking, because I like using that term because everybody hates it. Piggybacking on what she said, the world is getting more dangerous, right? We used to be the alpha, but we weren't always the alpha, and that's why we started sharpening our rocks and so on and so forth, and that escalation and evolution of man. And now the truth is that we've become so powerful as man that there's certain sects amongst us that have become more dangerous, right? They've become those predators, those apex predators, and so because those apex predators have evolved in the way that they attack us, good people with the right intentions, people with their hearts and their minds in the right place, need to become more lethal, right? And we tell people that before our classes all the time. It's like one of the first things I tell people is I say, we ask them the reasons why they're in the class, and then I stop and say, this is what I heard from everybody. What I heard is that each of you are tired of not being the alpha anymore, right? What you are doing sitting here in this class is you want to increase your level of lethality. That way you can protect yourself and the people around you, right? When shit hits the fan. You know the world is dangerous, you become cognizant of that fact, and now you're focusing on making yourself more dangerous than the world around you. So that way you can keep you and yours safe. And I think that's one of those things that we really focus on whenever we instruct. That's one of the reasons why we instruct, is because victimhood sits well with nobody, right? Good people standing aside and letting shit happen. You can argue that that's not a good person.
That's right. It's crazy though, like how many people actually do kind of hold on to their victimhood. There's like a fascination with being a victim in some cultures and in some populations, even within the United States. Right. And it's, separating, cause in the military world, I sat in a lot of rooms with a lot of people that experience a lot of really messed up stuff. And, part of it is separating yourself from your trauma. Right. And one of the reasons why I think that everybody should have, and I'm agreeing with you here, Jose and Koddie, one of the reasons I think that everybody should have an opportunity to a level of training, should they choose to seek it, is so that they don't ever have to become a victim if they don't choose to, right? There'll always be an opportunity you cannot be right 100% of the time, and you can't always be 100% prepared. All you can do is do the best you can. And when shit hits the fan, you resort to your highest level of training, right?
Right.
If your highest level of training is nothing and your adrenaline is cranked up and it's 3:00 in the morning and your door's getting kicked in and you can't hit the light switch and you don't remember if you racked around in the chamber and dogs are barking, kids are screaming, all that shit, and you have no training, you're ineffective. And more than likely, you're going to hurt yourself more than you hurt anybody else.
Liability.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I read this quote the other day. I can't remember who said it, but it was, I think it was maybe like an old Zen proverb, but it said, nothing happens to you, everything happens for you. And I really liked that because I'm a big believer in that. There's a lesson to be learned in everything. And
Mhm.
I think that one of the reasons why victimhood is so has become such a popular trend in some cultures is because it's the easy way out, right? It's a lot to be able to consciously accept responsibility for yourself, all your decisions, everything that happens in your life. That's a lot of responsibility, and it takes a lot to say, okay, yeah, I'm willing to accept that. But I think that once you do, it's incredibly empowering, and that's one of my favorite parts of teaching and instructing is helping people reach that point of feeling empowered to take that responsibility for themselves, and in this context their safety, but really just in general everything, all of what happens in your life.
Yeah, that's very true. We have this really screwed up law in Maryland, and I don't know if it's like this in out where you're at, but
Probably.
yeah, you guys are kind of operating behind enemy lines, same as us. But out here in Maryland, you have to wait 7 days after when you go to buy a handgun, you have to fill out it's called a 77R form. And well, not only that, but you have to get handgun qualification license training. It's HQL training. You have to do that. And then you have to be approved to be able to even purchase a handgun. And then when you want to purchase a handgun, you have to take your training down, your training cert and all this other stuff. And then buy a handgun, you have to wait 7 days before you can pick it up.
Well, that sounds
we actually don't have that. Not quite to that extent.
Yeah, it's pretty screwed up, right? So what I look at is those victim opportunities. Imagine you are, and I'm going to use a situation here that we could all relate with here, right? Imagine you're, I don't know, a 22-year-old young lady in college or something like that, and you're being threatened for rape or something. and you said, I need to be able to defend myself if something like this were to happen. Right?
Oh, there you go. There you are.
So
we lost you
we
for a
lost
second
you.
there.
You guys
We
lost
got
me for a
imagine
second?
you are. Yeah.
Yeah, we got imagine you
Okay.
are.
Yeah. So here's a situation that I think a lot of people can kind of relate with a little bit. Not that it's happened to many people, but we all can kind of paint this picture in our head. So imagine there's like a 22-year-old college lady, a young lady attending college, 21, something like that, right? And she starts getting threats for rape or something. And, you know, she feels that's going to happen to her. She's small, you know, she can't necessarily defend herself. So what's the best thing that she could do? Possibly, you know, report it and get surveillance or something like that. But even then, why not get a handgun or get something to be able to defend yourself? Maybe she made that decision to go and get a handgun. She goes down to the store, right? And they do the day of training there and whatever. They try to get her in. She applies for her HQL license. That takes 2 weeks. And then she goes down and tries to buy a handgun. That's another week. That's 21 days there where somebody could have very well acted on a threat. And that woman could become a victim for the rest of her life. And then she has to overcome that trauma at some point, right? And move from victim to survivor. And that's some shit that shouldn't have to happen based on the United States and our Constitution. You know,
Absolutely.
this whole constitutionality of the Second Amendment and the way that people are, you know, like the crazy ass laws we have in Maryland that prevent people from being able to protect themselves. We have the same situation with wear and carry, right? Not just conceal carry, but even just to openly carry a firearm in Maryland, it's damn near impossible to do. It really is a nightmare. But you know, and at some point I have to ask like the question, I'm not, you know, you guys probably aren't experts in this, right? You'd have to get like a lawyer or something like that. But how could you like assign blame? Like what if somebody wanted to purchase a firearm and was denied, and then the next day was a victim of a home invasion or something like that, right? Do you think that they should have like a legal recourse to sue the state or something like that for that situation?
Well, that's actually happened in recent times. There's certain media outlets that actually cover things like that. Believe it or not, those exist in this world.
There's a lot harder to find.
Yeah, and so those things do happen. And you're right as far as like legally trying to assign blame. We know like on a logical level like what's at fault, right? We know what's wrong with this, right? What's wrong with this picture? Like we know what that is. But trying to pin it on something legally is a little bit more difficult, especially when the people who make those legal decisions align themselves into a certain belief, right?
Yeah.
And right now that belief is to empower criminals and depower victims. And so it's kind of tough because we're swimming upstream.
Yeah, as far as like the logistics of who would hold liability in that situation, I really can't say, but I definitely would agree that those kinds of situations are infuriating. And I think if you were the victim or a loved one of a victim in that circumstance, it would be really frustrating.
That'd be hard as hell. And you guys are familiar with like red flag laws also, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we got a friend of ours. She's a representative for U.S. Law Shield. I don't know if you guys know what that is, and I'm not going to plug it here, but she works for U.S. Law Shield, and her fiance, they were legal firearms owners. Her fiance's ex-wife, some cuckoo chick, filed a red flag complaint against this lady's fiance, saying that he owns all these guns and he's been following her around and waving and all this other stuff and waving firearms at her and all this other shit. So the cops actually came and confiscated all the weapons, right? When that happens and you have to fight to get your weapons back, you're responsible for paying the legal fees for that. You're responsible for taking time off work to go up there and fight that stuff in court, all this other stuff, right? So not only did it happen to him once, it happened to him again, right? After he'd already been red flagged once, the crazy bitch got him through again on a red flag complaint. And then, so here's the crazy shit in Maryland. So when they red flag you and they come and they take all of your firearms, not just firearms. They take your swords. Like if you've got swords or shit like that, or any big knives or anything, they take all of that stuff and they impound it. And in Maryland, right? They take all of that stuff, right? Because you're a threat to yourself or others. That's what the red flag law does, right? If you don't get your stuff out of impound within so many days, you forfeit it. So the way that the system and the way that they're doing shit dirty over here is they extend your court date out like past that date, right? So you're like pulling your hair out. You're there fighting in the courthouse. Like, give me a court date. Let me hear my case, right? So I've brought all this paperwork. I've taken the time off work. I paid all the legal fees, all this stuff. And then but they'll still push your court date out, and then they'll impound all your shit. That's a mess, guys. So
that sounds pretty corrupt. I mean, I know the way that it works here is they're required to give you a hearing within a certain number of days. And of course, if they don't, I don't know who that falls on. I haven't seen that situation where they've pushed it out further than the law clearly states they're required
sure.
to do. So I'm not sure how that would work if that happens.
And I don't want to get it 100% wrong here. There's also situations where they do offer that court date, but then whenever the bailiff goes and gives the paperwork to the state police and says, hey, you need to release these firearms, there's lost paperwork, right? And it just never made it down there. And there's all that stuff that happens too. And it's just a shitty, dirty situation. And there's this active kind of campaign against firearms, the algorithms against us and all this other stuff, but that's neither here nor there. I took it down a really dirty hole right there. So you guys are, both engaged in the firearms training. I love that stuff. What would you say is your favorite type of student? Now, I heard Jose saying something about a philosophy where you take like a rough edge and then you chisel away the parts that don't necessarily need to be there, right? How does that compare, or how does that add to what your favorite type of student is? And I'll ask Jose first. Koddie, you may completely disagree.
My favorite type of student, I just like one that's willing to go. I like people who show up, who have not necessarily little to no fear of the firearm, but have little to no fear of trying something new.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, especially in people who are a little more experienced, they have a lot of you'll hear like, oh yeah, well the old guys have the bad habits and the new guys have, they have no habits, and so you can, shape them the way you want to. I really don't give a shit if you're old or new. What really matters to me is that you're there and you're like, okay, let's try this. Because sometimes you get little harebrained schemes and you're like, you know what, let's try this drill instead and let's see how this works. And they're like, okay, let's try it. That's what I like. I like a student to just be willing to just kind of throw more iron in the fire and see if it burns.
I like it.
I really love the students who I don't know if you've noticed this about me yet, but I have a very analytical mind and I love to analyze things and philosophize about things. So I really like those kinds of students, the ones who ask a lot of questions. They can sometimes be the annoying students in the class that everyone else is like, okay, shut up already. But I love seeing those wheels turning and seeing people start thinking about things that they'd never thought about before. Mm-hmm. And it's really fun for me when I see something click and like they get excited when, they have kind of like a, either an epiphany or like something that they accomplished that they hadn't been able to do before. So I kind of agree. I don't really care so much on the level of experience. It's sometimes, it's really nice to have people who get the basic safety rules right away. Those students who struggle with the safety rules can be a little difficult. So it's nice when, people can kind of get that down right away, because then you kind of get to have a little bit more fun without having to worry so much about micromanaging. But I just really, I agree with what he said about just people who are willing to try new things and not necessarily not afraid of what they're doing, but the ones who don't let that fear and that discomfort stop them from trying things.
Right.
When we first met, he used to always say, like, one of his biggest pet peeves is when people say, I can't. That was like the only word you can never say around me is I can't. And it's definitely rubbed off on me. So now, whenever people say things like, oh, I can't do that, that's a big no-no for us in our class. So I love when people are confronted with something that they think they can't do, but they just go, all right, let's try it anyway. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah.
So Jose, are you familiar with this? It's kind of like it's an Asian philosophy called pouring out your cup. Have you ever heard that? So you seem to like you're kind of into like the Asian thing a little bit. So I'm going to pull that one out. It's the only one I know. Okay. Besides The Art of War, right? I've read that book, Sun Tzu. But that is an Asian philosophy where it's more about, there's a lot of people that show up with bad habits, depending on your class size, depending on the population in your class. If you've got, some guys with a lot of bravado, or even some girls with a lot of bravado, right? Trying to baseline that and remove the ego is often pretty important. And if you're trying to, as Koddie mentioned, the safety part of it, right? If there's people that are just stuck on their bad habits and you can't break them of that to the point where they're unsafe, that's certainly an area where a bad habit could get in the way. So yeah, we try to keep an eye on that. So how does, I asked this to another individual and I got a pretty interesting answer. So I'm going to ask you guys, how do you deal with a student that kind of has a bad ego? Like, how do you break that down? Especially, actually, Koddie, let me ask you, because a lot of, I mean, just the nature of Americans, right? There's oftentimes this sexism that goes on there, and get some big badass guy. What's he going to learn from a girl, right? Something like that. Have you ever had to deal with that? And if so, how do you kind of break down that ego?
Yeah, honestly, I think I've been pretty fortunate. I haven't really had I haven't had any very bad experiences with that, at least not outwardly, right? There might be some people that have come through my classes or that I've trained that maybe have those thoughts, but I haven't really had anybody be super vocal about it towards me. And I don't know if that's just the fact that I've been fortunate, or if it has anything to do with, the way that I speak or the way I present myself or whatever. But I think one of the things that we do to try to combat that right off the bat is that we make a disclaimer in the beginning of our classes that there's no place for ego here, and we aren't going to act like we know everything. We like to share our background and our experience, not for the sake of, padding our resumes or making ourselves look cool or whatever, but so that people know where we're coming from and they know what our experience is, so that it kind of is a sort of a disclaimer that, this is where we come from. We don't have all the experience. You might have experience that we don't have. So everybody has something to offer. Everybody has something to teach, and everybody has something to learn. And that includes all of us and everyone in our classes. So I think we kind of like to try to make that disclaimer at the beginning. And so far, I think we've been pretty fortunate. We haven't really had anybody that's not been, at least, for the most part, receptive of that.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like we've just been blessed having the students that we've had, and some of them have more experience than we do. We just same thing, we just approach it very, very humbly, with as much humility as possible. I mean, we're just here to instruct, and if you want to learn, we'll teach. But if your ego is what's getting in the way between you and learning, then it doesn't matter who's in front of you.
Yeah, and I think we go into it too, knowing that maybe there might be a time that we run into that person who, there are people who like to come to classes just for the sake of showing the people in the class what they know. And that might happen at one point. I think one thing that I kind of keep in my back pocket is that if I get a student like that, I like to try to give them a job in the class. And that usually kind of keeps them occupied or gives them something to feel, a way to feel productive or a way to feel like they're contributing. And sometimes that kind of can curb a little bit of that need to constantly jump in or try to take over the instructor role. I haven't really had to do that in any of my classes, but I kind of keep that little tactic in my back pocket in case I run into a student like that.
Right. And one other thing too is asking them, right? So like, right, based off of what we know, based off of our experiences, right, this is what's most efficient. Right? You obviously know more about this specific thing. Let's hear what you have to say. How are you taught? Right? How would you do it? Why would you do it that way? And a lot of times people will say, "Oh, I did it this way. Why do you do it that way?" Well, I don't know. That's what I was taught. Oh, okay. Well,
A little humble pie, right? Kind of
right,
sit down on it a little bit.
Right. They're like, well, I don't know the reasoning behind it, but this is what I was taught. So it just depends. And everybody's taught everything. Like. Some people are taught to run backwards, and some people are taught to run, to churn and book it, to churn and burn, and some people are taught to run in Sewell, and some people are taught to run Temple Index, and everything is everything. I mean, everything has its applicability, and there's a reason why we teach as broadly as we do.
That's also why I'm a big advocate of people seeking out training outside of their local range when they can afford it, right? Because there's only so much you can get from, one person. you should always be seeking out training, which leads me to kind of my next question here for you guys is, where do you get your inspiration from? Right? Like, did you have a mentor, Jose or Koddie, when you were coming up that, you're like, yeah, this guy's got it figured out. I'm going to try to mimic what he's doing or she's doing.
I was, so like I said, my father was in the military. Most of my childhood was in Puerto Rico. Even though my family was in the military, I couldn't tell you what half of their jobs were. I really wasn't into the military growing up or anything like that. And to be honest, as far as my path goes in life, I'm kind of in uncharted waters. I didn't really look to anybody for guidance. I've always felt like the monk goes in the mountains and he brings a bunch of books with him and he sifts through all these books and he takes, a secret from this one and a secret from that one. And he constructs this being, this person who he is. And so I kind of felt like my life has been like that, I've taken a little from the Art of War and the Book of Five Rings and the Tao of Jeet Kune Do and a Street Smart song and just kind of, balled it up and twisted up and mixed it with, Wu-Tang Clan, and that's who I am. I mean,
I love it, man.
As far as I guess my big motivation, inspiration, or whatever to train and to really kind of dive into this world, I would say it really started when I became a police officer, and I think it kind of came out of necessity at first, right? It was like there was a time period before I became a cop that I wanted to get into law enforcement, but I was kind of talked out of it because I was always told, well, you're small and you're a woman and that's a scary job and it's too scary for you and that kind of thing. And so I kind of let people convince me that, well, maybe it's not safe enough for me, or I don't have the capability to handle a job that dangerous. And then I got to a point in my life where I was like, I'm just going to go for it. And then once I was in it, I kind of had a little bit of this realization, like, holy crap, somebody might try to kill me, And then I was like, I really need to get good at being able to defend myself. And being small in stature does have its advantages and disadvantages when it comes to that kind of thing. So it kind of started out, I think it was born out of necessity, but the more I got into like martial arts and firearms training, and the more I felt that sense of self-empowerment, and the more capable I felt of defending not only myself, but then kind of developed into feeling like this duty and sense of like privilege. Not, I was going to say obligation, but I think it's more of a privilege of being able to protect my family and the people I love as well. Then it kind of became more of like this is something I want, not necessarily, not that it's not a necessity, but I don't see it that way anymore. It's more of like, it became more of a passion.
Very cool.
And without diving too much more into the same rabbit hole, we firmly believe in like every single person has their own spirit, their own warrior spirit. And the more you feed the warrior spirit, the more it'll grow, the more it'll blossom into something big. And I think all those little things, like her saying, oh, this is a necessity at the time, right? That's her starting to feed that warrior spirit. And then as time has gone on, she's realized, right, what this can actually be, what her warrior spirit is, or who is inside of her talking to her, and what that's allowed her to become. And now it's almost like a chase, right? Like, how strong can I be? How fast can I be? How much better at jujitsu can I be? It almost becomes like this pursuit of infinite, and it's pretty awesome.
It's absolutely inspiring. And I think that you guys are in it for the right reasons. And it seems as if both of you guys are relatively humble. You understand that, your ego is out of it and you're working to improve yourselves out of, you mentioned out of first necessity, but not out of this desire to just be better, and this privilege that you now have to be able to protect yourself and your community and your family. And that's really cool. We see some people that get into, I've talked with folks that have been in law enforcement, and one of the reasons they pivoted into civilian training was because that was the only way they could get their range time, really, because they're only picking up, they're maybe shooting 50 rounds a year in law enforcement, and everybody thinks that there's some whiz shot or something, and they're just not doing that. So, they would start going to ranges, and they were seeking out their own training to better qualify themselves, and then they kind of went down that path of the U.S. The different training regimes. I'm not going to put any of them out there because I don't really advocate for anything individually, but and then they find themselves training, and then they kind of do the parallel path of what you're doing, where they're both law enforcement and civilian trainers. So that's really cool. And the one thing that I think that law enforcement can bring to the table that civilian guys or even military guys like myself and my partner is the understanding of the law itself. I was talking with a guy from down in Arizona, Josh Logan from Guardian Training and Consulting. And again, I was mentioning that that's a concealed carry state. There's no real reason to go and seek out, pay for training that you could probably find online or you and your buddies can put together in the barn or something. But he's doing very well for himself offering pistol training in Arizona. And where he kind of excels among other people in the industry is because of his understanding of law, right? He was active duty for years in North Dakota, and then he was active as law enforcement in North Dakota, and then he went down to Arizona and he was law enforcement there. So he's got about 15 years of law enforcement experience. He was detective. He worked, violent crimes and gang activity and stuff like that. So he had his hands on that criminal element. And not only that, but he fully understood the laws surrounding carrying and where you can and can't carry and all of that other stuff. So that's kind of something I kind of envy about you law enforcement type that you bring to the table is a better understanding of the law. Because one of the things about the gunfight is once the gunfight's over, oftentimes that's where the real fight begins, right? It's now you've got to justify your shots that you took, right? And you better damn well be prepared for that.
Right.
We were talking the other day and it's like there was this in a certain situation there was a person that was shot 5 times by a cop. And the first 2 shots were justified. The third shot was not. And the fourth and fifth shot were justified. So that third shot alone made the whole situation unjustified and the cop lost his job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's situations like that I think aren't being taught well enough in the situation in training. Everybody wants to learn how to defend themselves and get that first shot off, right? But then what do you do after you get that first shot off? You have to assess, right? Assess, do I need to re-engage or do I back off? All right. And then in those mental loops that you find yourself in where it's just, shoot. And it's like, well, shit, did you really need to shoot that many times? So really taking the element of, preparing yourself for what happens after you squeeze that trigger on a human being and then understanding the law that you're going to have to face afterward, I think is something that law enforcement brings that your average civilian instructor doesn't bring. So I'm going to ask both of you, since you both have that background a little bit, what level of understanding of law do you guys bring into your training for your clientele?
Well, I mean, I would agree with you that I do think that's a big strength that we have to offer. And actually in our concealed carry classes that we offer, I haven't been through, I can't speak on all of them. I haven't been through all of them, but I know compared to like the online course and the one that I completed several years before I became a law enforcement officer, our class has a really heavy emphasis on the legality of use of force and carrying and that kind of thing. We actually spend a lot of time talking about that. And it can be, you're right about how it can be difficult kind of from a business standpoint to compete with, the $30 online course that you can click through in 20 minutes and be done with versus spending 4 hours of time on your Saturday and, twice as much money to come and sit through our class where we talk about stuff that might not be that exciting, right? The legality stuff is not usually as much fun as talking about shooting or actually shooting. But we really, really heavily emphasize that part of it because we do think, I agree with what you say about how, once the gunfight is over, that doesn't mean that like the situation is done with and you're good to go, right? That can be sometimes equally as traumatic going through the aftermath of what happens after you have to use force against someone. So we talk a lot about like the use of force continuum and how it's a very dynamic and ever-changing situation. It has to constantly be reassessed, and you can go from being justified to not justified in a matter of seconds, and you can go from not being justified to even draw your firearm to being justified in firing in a second, just like that. So I think all of the points that you brought up are things that we really stress a lot in our classes. And I don't know, I do find that people, once we start having those conversations, actually get really engaged, because a lot of people, again, kind of going back to like how often people have misconceptions about how to use firearms. The misconceptions about the law are probably even more vast. And I don't know how many times we hear people say things in classes like, well, can't you just do this? Or can't you just say this? Or, what if you just, I just panicked. What if you say you just panicked and started shooting? Things like that.
Don't do
So,
that.
yeah.
Don't
So,
say
yeah,
that ever.
right.
Well, one thing that we like to really do and emphasize in the classes too is that we try to arm people with what the statute is itself in and of itself, federally and state, and then what does case law say as far as our circuit courts go, right? Like what does case law say? And then we arm them with that, and then throughout the class, whenever there's questions, we always say like, I don't know, what would you do? Because there's always like, well, what if this? What if that? What if I shoot a gun in the air? What if I shoot on the ground? What if I shoot a dog? Right? Everyone has like a million questions, and so it's like, I don't know. You put yourself in that situation because at the end of the day, you have to answer for that. So then in the class, it almost comes to like, we know the law, but when you leave here, it doesn't matter how much we know the law. It only matters is how much you know the law and what your articulation of your actions are.
Yeah, we do. I like to play this game kind of because, like, so as a law enforcement officer, I often have to testify in court, right? And so when I go through my cases and my investigations, I go through them with this mentality of like, well, if I were a defense attorney, what would I be asking myself, or what questions, what things that I've done would I be attacking and trying to pull apart? So I like to do the same thing in those scenarios, in those classes. So we'll ask somebody, okay, well, what would you do? And they tell us. And then I step into the prosecutor role and I'll start asking questions. Okay, well, why did you do that? Okay, but what about this? And then they kind of get stuck. And so having been through some of those, like, not necessarily like from the defendant standpoint, right? But having, gone through homicide investigations and understanding what kinds of questions prosecutors ask, and what kind of things the district attorney or a grand jury are going to look at when they review the facts of the case and decide whether you're going to be charged with a crime or not. I do think we have a lot of experience in that from an investigator standpoint. And so that kind of gives us that an edge, I guess, when we're explaining to other people how these situations are going to be looked at from a legal standpoint and all of the factors that play into that decision.
I think that you're right on all of that stuff. And what we see, I thought you were actually going to say these exact words, but I'll say them for you. So that's where we see a lot of those aha moments, right? Is in the class where you start talking about the law stuff and everyone's like, oh, can't we just practice holstering, something like that? And then you start talking about the law stuff and then they have those aha moments. They're like, okay, this really is important stuff. I probably should understand this. And then the follow-on phone calls that we get are generally about the law. They're like, hey, I'm going to be doing this. Can I bring my firearm? Or how should I, if I'm going from Maryland up through DC over to Virginia, when do I have to pull over and like put my gun in the trunk and then get it back out? It's always about the law. It's never about holstering anymore. Right. It's like they want to do the holstering and the drawing and all that stuff at class. But then afterward, it's always about the law. So I think that's pretty cool. And it's good that you guys have that background and that ability to communicate that effectively to your students. I think that's something that's overlooked. And you get a lot of these run and gun kind of gun companies that pop up that just want to do dynamic drill type stuff, right? And they don't focus on any of that everyday carry type stuff. There's a place for that, right? There's a place for the dynamic drills, but I think that there also needs to be a place in every regime that talks about the laws of the land. So it's cool that you guys are doing that. So aside from the kind of concealed carry course and the other courses where you're teaching law, what other classes does Bushido Defense offer out there?
We do a basic pistol course. We offer that to private parties. We also do women's only. Temporarily, we're not doing those, but we also have a combative pistol course, and the combative pistol course is a 2-day course. The first day is all live fire. And we pretty much run people through a range, and we teach, the difference between a skill and a tactic and a strategy. We really break those down. We even cover TCCC and self-care. And then the second day is all shoot house force on force, where we teach tactics when it comes to working through building clears and really learning how to utilize cover and concealment. And then we have people face off and watch them shit the bed so we can fix things.
That's cool.
That's always the most fun.
Yeah.
Course, right?
I'd like to eventually dabble into a rifle course. The issue is, I mean, these are things that as a new firearms business owner, you know, that you don't ever think. The whole curriculum has to be drawn up by you. It has to be tested. It has to be vetted. I mean, I don't know if everybody does that, but like, I like getting people out there who have experience, you know, in law enforcement, military, run them through the course and be like, okay, what did you like? What did we not like? How can we modify this, right? And then the whole process for us to get one class up and running is about 6 to 8 months, you know?
Yeah, it's tough because this is like kind of like you. This is a side gig, right? So we both have other full-time jobs, and so finding time is always the hardest part. Once we get an idea in our head, it's like we kind of get really gung-ho on it, and then we'll spend all of our extra time, and then oftentimes we're like, okay, we need a break. we haven't stopped working for, you know, the last couple months. So, but just to clarify, by the way, his statement about how we're not doing women's only classes anymore temporarily. The reason for that is because I obviously am the one teaching those classes, because we really do think that women's only classes, not to say that there's anything wrong with having a male instructor teach a women's only class, but I think there's something to be said about having a female instructor in those classes. And that's, I think, what that kind of makes it, I guess, brings it to a different level as far as that female empowerment and that sense of comfortability that a lot of women don't feel going into classes where there's men initially. And so I am not able to do any live fire right now because I'm currently expecting. We're expecting.
Well, congratulations. Look at those.
Thank you.
Telling me that.
So that's the only reason that's on pause for now, but we are excited to get back to those eventually once we're able to.
That opens up a lot of questions that I was hoping to get to. So let's just jump right ahead into that. So I was talking to somebody the other day about the live fire, about the, not live fire, the women's only type training. It's something we offer. We used to have a woman trainer on staff, but she exited, she moved away. So now we're down and we just have guy instructors, right? Mm-hmm. But we still offer the women's only. And it really, there's some women who don't want to deal with the bravado of the guy. And then that adds another dynamic whenever there's maybe some macho guy, right? Like in the class is super hot and all the women are just fawning over him. You know, it's never the other way. There's never a hot chick in class, right? And all the guys are fawning over them. I'm just kidding. But when you separate that out, right? And maybe the women they've had something happen to them and they're not comfortable around guys. Right. Or where we kind of see the need is when we're doing concealment. A lot of times women are comfortable pulling up layers of their clothing to get to their firearm, right? When guys are around, whatever it takes to make that person, the student, more comfortable. And I was talking to somebody the other day and he's the same way. He won't do women's only classes because he doesn't think it's worth it if he doesn't have a woman instructor. I'm like on the fence about it, you know?
Yeah.
We don't have a woman instructor, but should we not offer the class because of that? You know, maybe it's not the instructor that's the problem. Maybe it's the other students, right? So we offer it. And if the classes don't fill up, then we just kind of bundle them with the other classes and we try to get that out there. But I definitely think that there needs to be more women in the firearms instruction area. One of the biggest things that we're missing, at least in our company, is the concealed carry component for women. Women just wear different clothes than guys do. You know, how do you conceal carry in a dress? You know, what are you doing? Like a thigh carry or something, or like, I don't know. Whenever you go to the bathroom and take your romper off, right? Like, where do you put your stuff? I don't know. I don't deal with that.
It gets weird.
I bet it does get weird. A buddy of mine sent me a picture today. He went to Lowe's and he had his pistol and all of his pocket shit sitting right there on the handicap rail. He's like, anytime I go anywhere, I only use the handicap stalls because they all have a spot to put your gear. I was like, yeah, you're right.
Baby changing table.
What's that?
The baby changing table.
That's right. That's another good one. So, you know, what do you think? How do you think, Koddie, that we could get more women involved in this industry? You know, as I mentioned, I'll give you a second to think about that. As I mentioned, you know, this show really is to kind of open the world to civilians and to everybody else, really, that, you know, firearms instructors are everyday people. A lot of us have everyday jobs outside of instructing. You know, We're just doing this stuff to not only improve our craft, but to teach safe firearm stewardship to the rest of the population, right? A lot of people argue that a better armed society is a more polite society. I follow that creed myself, right? So as society, right, it's men and women. How do we bring more women? What can we do to bring more women into this industry?
Well, I will admit, for me, like as part of my personal journey was overcoming sort of that sense of or that feeling of inferiority when it comes to like, am I qualified to be an instructor? Are people going to take me seriously? Are people going to think that, you know, I know what I'm talking about? Or are they just going to kind of write me off because of the way I look or because of the fact that I'm a woman or whatever? And we actually kind of had an exchange when we first talked about this, because I thought, well, you know, do you really think that I'm qualified? Because I look at people that have so much more experience, because there are people that have way more experience than I do, and I would kind of tend to compare myself to them. And he sort of helped me realize, well, just, you know, you don't have to be the most experienced person in the world to still have something to offer. And there's a lot of people that would feel so much more comfortable learning from you than they would learning from me. This is kind of Jose talking to me. And so that was really a powerful thing for me to hear that and to think about it in that context. Because when I first started out in firearms training, I was one of two women in a room with about 30 dudes. And they were all, you know, pretty alpha military and law enforcement type guys. So it was intimidating, you know. I mean, I still did it because that was my job and I had no choice. But I could definitely see how I could see why a lot of people would be intimidated by that. And so I thought for me, the kind of the big motivation and push for me was, you know, there are a lot of people that I think I could help, that would maybe feel more comfortable learning from somebody like me, or just even to show other people that, um, like you're saying, that a firearms instructor doesn't just have to fit this one bill of being like a big macho dude or like some special forces guy or something like that. But, you know, just to kind of show people that we all we all look different, we all come from different levels of experience, different, you know, body types, different genders, whatever, and that anybody can do it as long as you have the will to put in the time and learn and train and develop the skills, and the will to really, you know, communicate what you've learned to other people and help other people. So as far as what we can do to get more women into the field, I really just think it's a tough question to answer, because it's the same question that we've faced as far as how do we get more women into the law enforcement field or more women into the military. And I do think it's happening slowly, but I just think seeing other women who are willing to kind of step up and step into those roles, and then having women seek out training and getting passionate about learning about firearms is gonna, I think it's happening. I just think it's happening a little bit slowly. But I just think continuing to really, like what you're doing, try to demystify the whole firearms training, you know, world, I guess, and trainers, and kind of get rid of this concept that you have to be a certain
Mhm.
person to be able to teach other people. I think that's really all we can do. I don't think there's like a really magic answer, you know, to pull people in, but just continuing
Right.
to try to teach, and empower women to learn these skills, and then they're gonna. I think like for me, once I got comfortable in them, it's really fun to teach other people how to do this kind of stuff, especially other women. Um, and I love teaching men and women. And I actually initially didn't so much care for the idea of the women's only classes. But the first one that I did, I had so much fun and I completely changed my mind about it. So I think going
That's a
into
big
those
answer.
classes, yeah, it's a lot to unpack there.
Oh, I
But
like it.
when I started, my concept or my philosophy, I think going into those classes is the same as it is with all firearms training. Is that I think if you're uncomfortable, if it's something that you're kind of intimidated by, there's nothing wrong with starting out small and just kind of just dabbling a little bit into it. And so I think if, for a woman who's a little bit uncomfortable with it, if they want to start out in women's only classes with female instructors, that's awesome. And I think that's a great way to get started. I would always want for my students the progression to be to continue to push yourself into levels of a further discomfort, because I think that's how we improve. So I would want to always encourage women that take my women's only classes to eventually go to a training with men, because you're going to feel uncomfortable and you're going to have to push yourself through that. And I think that helps us get better. So that would kind of be my goal, my hope for people in their training progression.
That's very good. So, Jose, how'd you get her into it, since she didn't answer the question? No, I'm kidding.
No, so ultimately for me, the way I see, and this is just women and men in general, right? The difference is that men work a lot more, and this isn't mine, I'm borrowing this from somebody, but I can't remember who it was, but they operate a little bit more in a hierarchy, right? Like we see alpha dog, and alpha dog barks and says, hey, we're shooting now. And everybody says, okay, we're shooting now, right? And they all kind of fall in line and they'll fight amongst themselves until somebody's better than alpha, and then they take the lead, and then the flock all moves over to whoever the next guy is. Women aren't like that. Women learn and grow, and they tend to really flourish when they're taught by committee. And I think the answer there is to give it time, because the more women who start stepping into this arena, the more women will flock, right? Because they're not like men. Like we see, like, I don't know who's like a big tactical name. We see JJ Rakaza doing a freaking, sub-second appendix draw, 1 round, and everybody's like, we're doing it. Women aren't like that. Women are like, they'll see it and they're like, nah, that's all right. But if they see like 3 or 4 women out shooting and practicing it, then they're like, yeah, maybe I'll go try that. And that's kind of the way that goes, is that I think men, just naturally, we're very, militant, and I have nothing to back any of this. I'm not a scientist, but like we're a lot more militant, just in the way that our mind works. Even the men that aren't as militant, but just in the way our mind works. We kind of operate in a hierarchy, whereas women operate by committee.
That's good philosophy. I think that there's society pressures at work as well. I think that you touched on that a little bit, Koddie, that when you were talking about deciding to go into law enforcement, people told you couldn't, right? People told you weren't big enough, or you're not strong enough, or it's too dangerous, right? And you see that. And then now with kind of the advent of social media, I think this social media, although you do see some of the big wins for women in firearms on social media, what you generally see, and I don't know if you guys have heard this term or not, but the gun bunny kind of scene, right? It's always a hot chick shooting a rifle and her butt jiggles, right? That's like, that's what is selling for women in firearms. It's not, the freaking sponsored shooters that are out there kicking ass, right? And running and doing those sub-second draws with the 0.2 split, right? It's not, that doesn't sell. Sex sells, right?
Right.
And so I'm wondering if that has something to do with it. If we could remove that stigma, right? That women shooting guns doesn't have to be sexy, right? Then maybe, because it is, but if you can remove that, I'm a guy, you know what I'm saying? But there's more to it, there really is. So it's all about how it's being sold to society right now. Right now, it's the gun bunny stuff.
I like to think that there's a little bit more of I guess what I would call like real women in firearms, in the sense that, not that the gun bunnies aren't real women, but just in the sense that oftentimes for a lot of women, those women are not people they feel like they can relate to. I'm talking about like moms and, people who have like professional careers where they couldn't post photos like that of themselves online and stuff like that. I think there's a little bit of a movement happening now. It might be small, but I know that it's starting here. And I know a couple of I know one local instructor that comes to mind, Stephanie McGanty. She owns Bellatrix Training, is really big in helping to try to kind of push out this concept that like you can be a woman and be involved in firearms training, and you don't have to have your boobs out or your butt out. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just a little bit more relatable to most women that I think have that desire to learn how to protect themselves and their family and that kind of thing. So I like that that's becoming a little bit more popular. I don't know if that permeates like through the whole gun community or if it's just kind of a little sub community that we have going on here, but I am seeing more of it, and it's nice to see that, I think.
I'd like to see more of it. I really would.
Yeah.
The only other like real all-star female instructor that I know of is actually over in your guys' neck of the woods. Her name's Belle McCormack. She runs Firearms Academy of Seattle. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. So
I'm not.
they
Yeah,
have,
okay.
it's a little school. It's pretty nice. They operate, I think they split both Washington and Oregon. So I think they're like 2 hours from Eugene and 2 hours from Seattle or some shit like that, like right in the middle, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not a geography major, so don't quote me on those distances. I just know that they serve that area, and it's the Firearms
Okay.
Academy of Seattle. And Belle McCormack, she's a Masad Ayub certified instructor. Masad Ayub,
That's
if you
awesome.
guys don't know, he's a badass, right? So
Mhm.
Belle is one of his kind of proteges, and she regularly trains with him, plus hosts him, and she teaches his curriculum up there at that range. So that's the only other real. And I'm not a be all end all, right, in this industry. I just know a lot more guys than I know girls. And the only other girl I know, I know two besides yourself, and one of them is Belle, and she kicks ass. She won't come on the podcast yet. I don't know why, but I'm gonna get her on. Maybe she just doesn't think she needs to, but yeah, spreading this message and getting women's in firearms instruction is a big thing. We've put out, ads trying to bring women on our team, and we just can't get them. And the ones that
Yeah.
do like apply, they're looking for something different than what we're looking for. I don't know what it is. It's not to, as you put it, right? You're all about, when are you going to learn the most? You're going to start learning the most when you're comfortable. And then you put them in that position where you're uncomfortable, right? Rise to the occasion and play to your, you know, play to your level. Always play up a level. It's the way I coach kids in football and coach kids in
Mhm.
wrestling and everything else. It's right. Put the kid in the ring with the bigger kid, right? He'll either get his
Right.
ass kicked and learn, or he'll win and he'll learn something, right? So, how do we get these women into this industry? That's big. And if you're willing, I'd love to get more of your ideas kind of offline off the podcast and see if we can't get something going out here.
Yeah.
I would ask you guys to come out here and hold a course. Maybe after you're looking at a while before we're going to be able to make that happen. So
Yeah.
I think your priorities are straight though. Really, I do.
Yeah.
So let me pivot a little bit here. I've actually got a few questions here, but the one that I really want to get to here is we're coming up on we've been at this a little bit here, is this one. I ask this to everybody. This is kind of my go-to signature question I ask everybody. And it has to do with your fundamentals of firearms. Like, if somebody were to come to your class and they were there for one class and they left, right? And that was the last time you ever saw them again. What are the 3 fundamentals that you hope they take with them? Now, you can think about it, and I have 2 answers, right? That I like to bring up. One of them was from Matt Watson from Tactical Operations Consulting. He said that there is this brevity of situation, this accountability of the moment that everybody needs to be prepared for. He doesn't think people are prepared for enough. And that's after you squeeze that trigger, are you willing to live with the fact that you just killed somebody? Right? Not enough people are talking about that. That's what he hopes people take with him. So with that, and maybe you've had a little bit of time to think about it here, like what are your 3 fundamentals that you hope somebody takes with them?
Well, I would say that is a really good point that I think you said Matt was his
Matt
name,
Watson, yeah.
that Matt Watson made, and actually it's a point that we make at the beginning of every class is we actually kind of do like a let's take a moment, kind of not necessarily a moment of silence, but we're just going to take a moment right now and sit with this thought, because if you haven't sat and thought about that before, you need to. And so we discuss that, like that if you're going to carry a firearm and wield a firearm, there's the possibility you might have to take a life, and have you consider that possibility and the weight of that possibility. And if not, sit for a minute right now and think about that. Because I agree that that's definitely a consideration that needs to be made long before you start walking around the world with a gun. Um, But as far as the fundamentals, I think we would both agree that you really could break it down. I don't know about 3 fundamentals, but I would break it into 2 categories: the physical fundamentals and the mental fundamentals, or the philosophical, which I think are equally important. I would argue that the mental aspects of training and carrying and using a firearm are maybe more important than the physical training and physical skills. So I think just having an understanding of the value of human life and the power that you wield if you're going to carry a firearm, not only to take a human life but also to protect life, is a really important factor that you need to think about. And then as far as on the mental aspect side of it too, kind of what Jose already touched on, that idea of feeding your warrior spirit. We talk a lot about this concept that, like, a gun is a tool, but you are the weapon. Your mind is the weapon. And I think really one thing that I always really want people to know and to really take with them when they leave is that the most valuable asset I think you can have as a defender of yourself or anyone else is just the will to win, the will to fight, and the will to survive. That's kind of, I guess that's my piece on the mental side of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Physical and mental. If we were to break it down into 2 things, you have to train both and train them in sequence. I think too often people will train too much on the physical side and they end up with, PTSD, or they end up with some sort of issue going on, because they haven't really had the time to sit and develop the resolve of their actions prior to them happening. And we have this thing that we always use, that the body can't go where the mind hasn't been. And we really like to use that because that's kind of that instance, right? Like, you could teach yourself skills, you can teach yourself how to shoot on the flat range, and that's nice and all. But until you have to, like, actually take that life, there's a big difference there. You have to make sure that you're mentally prepared and that your head is wrapped around that. Like, this is kind of something that I say at the end of our combative pistol courses, but the tomahawk didn't make the Apache the warrior, and the sword didn't make the samurai the warrior. And the gun didn't make, the Marine the warrior. Ultimately, what it was that person. It's the result, right? We talked previously about how humans, unlike any other animal in the animal kingdom, if we're outnumbered or if we're outsized, we still have a way to find victory, right? And that's kind of that thought, right? That animal within, and how deep you can dig for your own survivability, and not just physically but mentally. Because if you survive physically, something up top still might not be right. And if you survive mentally, maybe your spirit's floating away somewhere. And so it's kind of having like that, going back to the Asian theme here, but like that yin and that yang, right? You have to understand the soft and the hard. And it's tough to teach that in the amount of time that we have, but that's something that we try to bestow on everybody, is open up the door to the world, right? Because there's so much more to learn than what we could possibly imagine teaching.
Absolutely. That's some pretty powerful stuff, guys.
I think the biggest thing ultimately for both of us is just that we want people to walk away with is that concept of that warrior spirit and that will, above any kind of physical training, or not. I mean, we obviously think that's important, but.
So one thing you guys didn't mention here, and I think a lot of people agree that this is something that often goes without mention because it's assumed, is safety, right? Never talked about safety. And I think that's just because that's assumed, right? Like, we assume that you're going to be safe. It's everybody pushes that so hard in all of their classes. It's like, yeah, of course they've got the safety thing, right? So it's kind of like one of those wasted answers, If you had to pick 3, everyone already knows safety. We're going to ignore that.
Okay, that'll be our third.
Yeah, there you go. That's our third. No,
I think
we actually do at the beginning of our classes. We always do we do our 4 universal rules of firearm safety. We do a +1 and everyththen we're always like, if you take anybody's class and they don't go over these things, take your money back and walk away. Yeah. Right? It's like, but again, I kind of like you. I just feel like that's like the assumed answer.
Yeah.
If I sat up here, you're like 3 fundamentals, and I was like safety, you'd be like, all right, moving on. This guy's going.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. I just called you guys out on it for the fun of it. But So I'm an engineer by trade, and I don't know, I'm not going to bore you guys. One of the things that we study is thermodynamics, right? It's like the transfer of heat and energy. And there's this thing called the zeroth law that, I don't even know if you knew that you could put the TH on the end of zero, but you can. So the zeroth law, right, of thermodynamics, I think that the zeroth law of firearms is that safety, the 4 fundamentals, right? So, yeah, I don't discredit you guys for not mentioning it because it is assumed. So very cool. I like that. That's those are interesting answers. I really like those. It's a little bit different than other stuff I heard. I spoke with the hell was his name? Aaron Ackland, I think, the other day. And he hit very similar. He said, but he added the spirituality part to it, right? So he separated out the mental from the spiritual, right? Where you guys have kind of combined them, right? So, but yeah, that's very interesting stuff. So I guess my last question for you guys here before we cut you loose is what's next, right? What's next for Bushido Defense?
Oh man, we're super busy, and so it's always takes. I have a notebook in every single corner in the house, so the ideas are constantly flowing, and I'm constantly trying up new curriculum and critiquing our old ones. And right now, what we plan on doing is we plan on maintaining course a little bit. We have a lot of really good stuff coming. We have certain people that we're blessed with the opportunity to train with moving forward. And we're going to keep booking some combative pistol course, basic pistol course. We still have a lot of interest in the area, and that's one of those things that as you keep feeding the well, it keeps emptying out. And so we kind of have to learn how to get on that bicycle a little bit and kind of find the right flow. I would like to do a little bit more defensive tactics as far as like unarmed combatives, because nothing's better than punching somebody in the face and then getting punched in the face. There's a lot of lessons to be learned.
I would argue that one better thing is not getting punched in the face.
Debatable. She's here, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Word for me.
Right. And so that's kind of what we're looking at. I mean, I have, not to kind of like pour all of my projects out, but I'm a double major right now in school, and I'm operating 2 businesses. I'm helping operate a 3rd business. And in addition to that, I'm also doing a little bit of EP work on the side. And so I'm a pretty busy dude. So,
and you're soon to be a daddy.
And I'm soon to be a daddy.
He's
so
about to get busier.
So one of those things is probably going to get hung up sometime soon. I'm not sure which one yet, but
I bet you Koddie knows which one it's going to be. And sure as hell ain't going to be the daddy responsibility.
Right.
No. And you know what? I'll be honest with you. I'm so excited for this little dude. Man, I'm so excited. It's going to be awesome.
Excited for you guys too.
Yeah, I think as far as Bushido goes right now, just because I'm kind of on a pause, there's a lot of stuff I can't do right now. It's a little more difficult to really make too many plans, but yeah, I think just kind of maintaining the courses that we've been doing, and maybe we're dabbling into trying to do some kind of joint training with some other local trainers would be awesome. We would love
question. There's a huge question.
Oh, what's that?
How do you appendix carry when you're 7 months pregnant or 8 months pregnant? You gotta be able to jam that thing in there somewhere. Like, how is it gonna happen?
I don't think so. No, I honestly have.
You don't want to know.
I'm still kind of working on that, actually. I thought about maybe a thigh holster, maybe off body. I have a chest rig, but I don't know how comfortable that's going to be either. So I'm gonna have to work, mess around with it a little bit and figure out what works.
I say she throws a papoose on the front, and then we just fold up my Mark 18, and you just throw that in there, right. And then when it's go time, right, man.
Yeah. My wife's got the double crossbody joints, right? She's got that thing going on, like the full detective suite. You know what I mean?
That's
underneath the coat.
That's amazing.
Yes, that's what she rocks. She loves it.
Does she rock revolvers in it?
No, she doesn't rock it outside the house, but she owns it and plays with it, and it's pretty cool. But that's awesome. That's like her. She's like, "I got you, bitch." so it's pretty cool. So yeah, all right, that's very cool.
Baby shower gift list.
All right, one last time, guys. Where can people find out more about Bushido Defense?
On Instagram at Bushido Defense. That's going to be like the go-to right now. We have a website that's not entirely completed just yet, but it will be soon. And if you guys you guys message there. We respond pretty close to right away. We're pretty active on there. Yeah. And if you guys have questions, man, give us a holler. We, as you guys can see, we're pretty talkative. We like to have conversation. You know, it's a good way to introduce ourselves and to learn more about you, and then to make us better instructors and better students.
Yeah, and we're really also open to, like, we do a lot of private classes. So if we have people that kind of show interest and they're like, hey, we want to do something like this around this time, it's pretty common that we'll just like create a class for that group or for that person and say, okay, hey, what do you want to do? And we'll make a class or schedule something for that group. Actually, private classes are the most fun, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like they really move the needle too as far as like the business goes. Those are kind of, I feel those are where we learn the most, and that's also how we teach the best. So I'm hoping that kind of increases. Speaking of the next step, I'm hoping that kind of increases, because that's really, those are money.
All right, very cool. So with that, everybody, everything that you need to know and ways to find Koddie and Jose and Bushido Defense are going to be down in the show notes. There'll be links. Go out there, support your local range. If you're on training, you're on travel, if you're going anywhere around the country and you find yourself up there around the Oregon area, seek out Bushido Defense and get yourself some training out there. Until next time, guys, always remember, learn, defend, rebel. We're out.